good. Okay, so hi Shrikant, good afternoon, and welcome formally to Leaders and Libraries event. Thank you for joining the force. And before we get started and discuss in detail about the lovely book that you have picked up, let me have the honor of introducing you to the audience. Good afternoon, everyone, viewers and listeners on this event, Leaders and Libraries. Welcome back. We have yet another guest, and you have listened to many of them over the last 1 month. And we have one more person, Mr. Srikant Vijayakar, with whom I got connected through another friend of mine, Vikas Dua, on an event where he was a guest. And I'm happy to have him today. He is Director Asia Operations with COPC Inc., a global consulting management company. Is somebody who works in the space of process improvement, workforce management, Six Sigma belt, person, PMP. So anything related to process, you have the man with whom I'm going to talk for the next 40 minutes. And now, when you relate his work and think about the book that he chose, I can see a strong correlation, right? Which I didn't earlier, but now I could do it completely. So thank you, Shrikant, for joining the force and willingly accepting the invitation to come on board.
It's my pleasure, Raju. Thank you for inviting me.
Lovely. So let's get started. I have the first interesting question to you is Shrikant and books and Shrikant. How do these two go together?
Uncomfortably. If you ask my family, they will probably say that you should not ask that question at all, ever. I have an obsession, to be very honest with you, and to a certain extent, it also comes from a deep set philosophy about learning about different
Right.
things. And since childhood, I've been kind of reading and being kind of a nerd, right, to a certain extent. And it just kind of kept on growing as things became more and more, into workspace as well as personal space. I write, I read, and technical stuff, non-technical stuff. So it just became quite a bit. And if I teach also, just to kind of add to what you. Thank you for that lovely introduction, by the way, Raju. But just to kind of give a little bit of perspective, I also teach in some of the business schools, and there is several times people will keep on asking you, what should I read, right? And I'm sure you have come across that question, and it's a very uncomfortable question to answer because
Yeah,
there is just so much to tell, right? I mean,
I know.
where do I I have always, and if I can take a couple of minutes, just hopefully this will set the
Please go
tone.
on.
Um, Whenever I thought, and I thought, why am I uncomfortable giving that answer? Not just because I have just too many books to recommend, but I always thought that reading books is like breathing. Right? You have to read just to survive, right?
Yeah.
But on a closer scrutiny of that subject, I realized that it's actually not breathing; it's actually like eating,
Mm,
like having a diet, right? So for any person, when they ask, what should I read? I
mm,
need to be able to talk about what is it that, what is your current diet and what will work for you.
mm.
And then when I started to think about it, I also write a few blogs, and then I wrote a post about it and got a few nice, interesting comments about it. I wrote that, just like you approach your diet, right?
Mm.
You should approach reading books, which is
Absolutely.
you consider, so for any diet, right? You talk about a balanced diet, right? A balanced diet will typically have four parts to it, right? You should have carbs, you should have proteins, you should have vitamins and minerals, and you should have fats, right? So think about the books that you read,
Yeah.
right? Which will form part of carbs, right? So maybe management books, maybe some of your, autobiographies, right? Historical books, right?
Correct.
Things that kind of give you the energy to
Yeah.
work on, right? So
Yeah.
if you feel like, okay, this is what I should be doing, right? So that kind of is carbs, right? Proteins are the ones that really interest you, that make your muscles, right?
Mm,
That help you grow. So
mm.
to really enjoy reading, right? So, and I don't know what your personal interest is, right? But I mean, I read books on mathematics, I read books on physics, I read books on general science, right? And those are the things that keep me, kind of they help me grow, and I can relate some of those examples, to whatever I'm doing. I guess minerals and vitamins would be the things that will give you immunity, isn't it? So what gives you immunity? Generally, humor, right? So read Saki, for example, right? Read Woodhouse, right? Read things that will, make you laugh at things.
Beautiful.
And that's kind of, vitamins and minerals. And lastly, fats, right? And fats are the ones that you need when you are really down, right? When you
Hmm.
don't, when, your body needs fats when you don't have anything else to go with. So
Correct.
it's like, books on philosophy, so for me personally, books on philosophy, books on mythology are the ones that keep me going when
Hmm.
things are really down. Now, each one of us has to think about these four aspects and say,
Hmm.
what genre actually works for me? And then you balance your reading out. I mean, this is just, kind of a thought
Beautiful.
that I have in terms of reading. So if you ask me, what's my take on books, right? That's kind of what it is. So,
That's a
and then
lovely answer. That's a lovely answer. I have not thought about reading multiple genres of books from a carb, protein, fat, and minerals perspective. Thank you for doing that. And now I'm thinking, which are my carbs, which are my fats, which are my proteins.
and you need to have it balanced. You can't
Yeah,
overdo also, right? So don't read too many religious books also, right? Because you
I know.
don't, right? Don't read too much management books, because then that means too many carbs for you.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
You need to kind of balance things out.
And that's so important, right? Because currently I'm reading a leadership book, and today, if you ask me, probably my profession and my liking, I very naturally get pulled towards leadership books. There are hundreds written by hundreds of authors, yet this word leadership is a mystic word for me, right? So I get pulled to that a lot. Thanks to a couple of audio by Sadhguru, Isha, I read a little bit of spiritual that side also, which gives me some understanding. So I'm currently reading a book on the Rig Vedas by Shankaracharya. So there's a combination of that. On Kindle, I'm also reading a horror thriller, which is also current here. So three, four genres, as you rightly said, kind of keeps my diet pretty balanced. And I'm like, okay, I'm happy.
So
Happy
see,
to
you knew
overdose.
already, but now that I've given you a framework, right? So you know that this is something that you could use, right?
That's
For
the word, framework. I love it. There you go back to process and framework.
I think I've spent a lot of time with COPs. Just two of
Oh,
them,
lovely,
I know how
lovely,
to
lovely.
ideate it.
Oh God, I'm just hoping your better half is also pretty mathematic, number, and framework oriented. Else it will be tough for her.
No, actually, we are a good complement. So that she's more artistic, she's more that way, right? So that way, to a certain extent, I try to bring in the structure, and she tries to.
Lovely, lovely, beautiful. That's a fantastic articulation. That takes me to the next question, Srikant. That you've been reading for so many years, and you spoke about carbs and multiple genres of books. How has the reader in you helped you to grow the leader that you are?
um, Well, see, when I read, like I mentioned to you, right? I don't read for a particular purpose. I read it because I know that it's part of my diet. It's
Hmm.
part of my growth, right? So what I read doesn't directly affect,
Hmm.
right? And sometimes it does, right? Sometimes you directly get, like, for example, in immunity to change, we will talk about, right? There is a framework on, generating immunity to change, and I've used that in some cases. There are several places like that where when you read, you get a certain framework, you get some certain
Hmm.
set of things, certain, to-dos and stuff like that immediately. But in a lot of cases, in fact, one of the other things, and again, this is I don't know whether you thought about it or not, but a lot of times, right, new idea comes when you have two different fields collide with each other,
Right.
right? Any two different fields, you take biology and you take physics, you put them together, you get something new,
Hmm.
right? So, and this is a very interesting. I'll tell you one of the examples, if you allow me
Yeah,
to.
yeah, please.
So I was leading on consulting, right? And this was in Middle East, actually. This was in Egypt, and a large client had called us in, and we were trying to work on something. And my team was having a hard time presenting the findings, because there was a lot of pushback. I'm sure you have come
Yeah,
across
yeah, we have experienced this. Yeah.
times, right? And and at that point of time, I was in my room and I was just going through a few interesting things. And in Egypt, there is a lot of gemology, right? So there was stuff around that, and I was reading some book around it. It's just out of curiosity, and I found that there is a way in which you look at a diamond. That
Mm.
is on the four C's of a diamond.
Mm.
I don't remember it exactly, but so I may be wrong. This is like 10 years ago, but just because you asked me, I kind of remember. So you have four C's of diamond, right? One is you have the carat, you have the cut, you have the clarity, and you have the color.
Mm.
Are the four things, okay? And so basically, carat is the weight,
Yeah.
okay? A cut is how the diamond is shaped, right?
Shaped.
Clarity is in terms of, does it have any blemishes or whatever, right?
Can you see through?
So lesser blemishes, the better. And then the color, right, would typically be,
Yeah.
is it pure, right? And I said, take this framework and apply to the arguments that you are making.
Mm.
Any argument that you make should have these four C's,
Mm.
right? First of all, it should not have any color. It should not have any bias when you are presenting to your client. Okay. The second thing would be it should not have any blemishes, right? For example, whatever argument you are making, it should be solid with data, without any, so you have to go through it multiple times before you present it to the client so that they cannot poke holes in it, right? The third one is it should be very well articulated, which is the cut of your argument.
Mm.
And the
Mm.
fourth thing is that it should have weight, it should have material significance to your client.
Beautiful.
If you don't have these four, then your arguments will fall apart.
Mm.
So the point that I'm trying to tell you, Rajiv, is that a lot of times, right, these kind of ideas come in from things that I'm reading, which are entirely unrelated to management.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Right. And I'm finding that more and more happening as I read, like to your point, right? I also read a little bit of spirituality. So when I read some of that, I mean, I don't have to read Art of War only, right? Which is, I'm sure you have people who have come in and talked about Art of War and how it relates to how it is strategy. It's probably the best book written about strategy, right? But the point is that a lot of times you read an entirely unrelated thing, right? And you find that it's applicable even now after 2000 years, right? It's applicable, right? And this is the whole point about what Descartes talks about, right? Why do you want to read? Is because you can have a conversation from somebody who is dead 500 years ago. I can still speak with that person.
Oh, yes.
That's the joy of reading and kind of understanding. And when he says that, what he means, I mean, he also said that, by the way, 250 years ago, right? So what he meant is that for him, right, when he speaks with somebody 500 years ago, so he can relate to an Aristophanes, to an Aristotle, to a Plato, to a Socrates, right? That's the beauty of it.
Beautiful. I mean, I think though you said it doesn't directly affect you, but what you're able to do is create a direct correlation from something which is absolutely irrelevant to your subject, but able to create some connections there, right? Which can happen when you read a lot because you get multiple dimensions, multiple perspectives being given to you, isn't it?
I think people need to keep an open mind, right? One of the problems we find, and
That's the point.
advent of social media, one of the problems that I keep finding with people, that we are in this echo chamber. We only want to listen to what we already know, right? So this is which is what we call choice of
Yeah,
bias.
yeah.
We only will, if I am right wing, I will only listen to right wing stuff. If I am left wing, I will only listen to left. And it just kind of makes it more and more polar, more and more, divided. So as long as I'm open to, reading stuff, right? So I mean, my interest in mythology started because of my son. He wanted to know stories, so I started to get into it, and I realized that there are lots of Indian mythology stories, and written a few blogs around it. But then our interest kind of spilled over to other mythologies. And it's not just Greek, right? I mean, Greek is done and dusted. Everybody knows Greek mythology. But if you look at Assyrian mythology, Sumerian mythology, which is the story of Gilgamesh, right? It's such an interesting story, and a lot of it can be applied if you just keep your mind open.
Absolutely.
Right? So we currently kind of going through as a family.
You're true. But thank you for saying that, Shrikant, because one thing that I commonly do in all the interventions to my leader participants who come in, that whenever they think, oh, this book, how do I apply this? I
Yeah.
always tell them that, like you rightly said, I don't think there is any book that can't be applied. If you actually apply your head, you can bring even a Sumerian mythology, something from there, and apply it in your workplace or apply it in your personal life. Even one you may get.
Yeah.
It's just about thinking and being open to connect, right? Lovely, lovely, beautiful, beautiful.
Example that I gave you about, I mean, this gemology has got nothing to do with management thought, isn't it? But you can use that as a concept, and it works, and it worked very nicely in that project, by the way. So
Beautiful,
every
beautiful. Yeah,
it
yeah.
might.
And it impresses the listeners कि कुछ नया सुनने को मिला, right? वरना they are so used to listening to the same, my needs, I've understood the problem, the barrier, the asses, the should be kind of management words. This is very, very unique and very interesting. Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. All right, so many books. Quickly tell me, why did you pick up this powerful book, Immunity to Change? And I've used this umpty number of times. I've used it, abused it like left, right, center on change management. What made you pick up this book, Shrikant, for the conversation today?
I don't think we have enough time to to answer that question.
I know.
But I will. I mean, you know, you to a certain extent, I guess you already know the answer for it. But let me give a little bit of a background. Okay, so my interest has been mainly in the area of decision making. Okay, I mean, I do teach service operations, service innovation. In COPC, we do consult on customer experience. Um, but the area of interest that I have always had is on individual decision making. I've completed my PhD is on decision making. I've written a few papers around it, right? So on and so forth. So the area of decision making has always been of interest to me, and this is especially individual decision making
Mm,
in a business context, not
mm,
an individual. So you are you going to buy iPhone 12 or not is not a decision that I'm so much interested in it. But as a manager, if you have a certain situation, right, then what kind of things go through people's mind, and
mm,
what do they do, and how do they take decisions, right? And a
mm,
lot of times you find that a lot of management theories retrofitted,
mm,
right? I mean, anybody can say that I did this, I did that, and it worked out well. But at that point of time, when I am in that situation, what should
mm.
I do, right? And will it work? Will it not work, right? So that's the area that I have always been interested in, right? And I'm not too sure how interested you are in that topic, but just to for your listeners, one of the things to know is that decision making is a very vast
It is.
topic, right? It's so vast that it has multiple theories around it. Not just theories, it has multiple waves of theories. Okay. So broadly, the waves of theories can be classified into three parts. The first
Mm,
one is normally called, I think it's called prescriptive theories. Okay. So these theories used to focus on what we would normally consider like a decision making as a three set of three steps. Like for
mm.
example, you have the first one is kind of what is called framing the problem. So you
Right.
set the problem, then you generate options,
Mm.
and you make a choice.
Correct.
Right? So all the earlier theories up till I think about 70s or whatever 80s, right? A lot of were prescriptive theories. So you have your Herbert Simon, you have Fritz, you have Harvey, you have Lazarfield, right? So all of those, Mintzberg, for example, right?
Mm.
So those are the ones that would normally come into prescriptive theories, right?
Right.
And then this is where you have Herbert Simon's bonded rationality, right? On those concepts came in. But then over time, people, I mean, what is the logic behind bonded rationality? Is that you expect managers to be a rational individuals, and they take
Right.
decisions based on, okay, so like you have a decision matrix. If I want to buy a new car, then I will put, let's say, five columns of the cars. I will put some structures to it and say, okay, I will pick up this car because I've given a weighted average,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is the highest score. I will pick that up, right?
Mm.
But then over time, people have realized that it's actually not that. Humans are
Mm.
not as rational as you would expect them to be.
Mm.
And there are behavioral aspects to it,
Correct.
which is where you started getting, the first kind of wave of behavioral decision making, right?
Mm.
Which was focused on the processes of decision making. So you had Buchanan, O'Connell,
Right.
Kahneman, and Tversky, for example, right? The system one, system two, right?
Mm.
I'm sure you must have covered that book, Thinking Fast and Slow,
Yeah,
somewhere.
yeah. Powerful book.
So fairly well, but the focus has been on the process of decision making, right? Then we got around 2008, 2009 and all, we started to get into what we call the second generation of behavioral theories,
Mm,
which started to focus on the emotions,
mm,
right, of the decision making,
mm,
right? And like, for example, there is an inaction inertia, right, which also, these, Lai and Kagan talk about, right, is that we know that we need to do certain things, but we don't, right? And this is where things started to get more and more interesting. And so the reason why I picked up this book is because it comes out of that kind of genre of emotions based second generation of decision making.
absolutely. I mean, in fact, the methodology talks about whether it's immunity map or multiple other concepts. It talks helps you to kind of arrive at the decision that you said based on the option that you would have probably generated. So it kind of helps you to do that a little quickly, right?
Also
Without
the
much of a timeline.
also the focus is individual as a decision making agent, right? So
Yeah,
the individual is not sitting in isolation, they are part of a system, right?
correct.
And they have their own emotional baggage, they have their own personality, they have their
Hmm.
own ways of doing things.
Hmm.
So I mean, one of the biggest I think message that Immunity to Change as a book gave was that change, people don't, it's not that people don't want to change because they're afraid of change,
Hmm.
right? They
Yeah.
don't change because they have a certain set of inherent assumptions,
Hmm.
right? And that was a very powerful in 2009 when this book came out, right? This was a huge change in
Yep.
the general understanding of decision making in itself.
Right. Right. Right.
People know what to do. I mean, you and I, we know that we have to get up in the morning and do exercise, but we don't. I don't know about you. I don't.
I
Right?
do. I do. But the inertia is so much to push myself off the bed. Phew.
The inaction inertia, right, is, and it is not because we are afraid of change,
Yeah.
right? It is because of certain assumptions that we have at the back of my mind. And if I'm able to surface those assumptions, right,
Hmm.
then I'm able to work towards, right, a change. So the major, I think, contribution that this particular book gave to management thought, right, was it's not about fear, right? It is about assumptions. Uncover the assumptions, right? And you will probably be able to, get to get to an actionable set of things.
Absolutely.
Right? That's
Absolutely.
one of the reasons why I picked up this book. Uh,
Beautiful.
Second book, the reason is slightly more, I mean, tangential, but still related. I have written a few papers on, so the area of interest for me has been a body of knowledge called theory of constraints,
Hmm.
which is a kind of, it's not really a mainstream operations management theory, but it's there. It's been there since 1984.
Hmm.
And you know
Hmm.
about it, right?
I do.
Goldratt wrote a book called Goal. It became popular. Are you covering Goal anywhere in your?
One of the guests have picked up the book.
Okay, all right. So Goldratt wrote, Goal, and it became quite popular. Then people said, "Tell us how to go about, that decision." So he wrote actually another book called "It's Not Luck," and in that he gave a set of thinking processes, right? And then it kind of one thing led to another. There is an entire body of knowledge on theory of constraints, right? And eventually it came down to a place where you now have thinking processes as a body of knowledge in itself, right? So
Right. Right.
different thinking processes depending on what you are. So you have what we call a current reality tree, a future reality tree. The most simplest one is what is called an evaporating cloud, where you identify, one position, you identify. So typically, right, any decision making boils down to two choices normally. Think about any decision, right? Although you may have multiple choices, finally, it comes down to, you know, the classic to be or not to be, right? Right? And any kind of decision, then, so what Godard says is that you write that down, right? And then you identify the assumptions behind them, you
Hmm.
surface the assumptions. And if you are able to take care of, getting rid of some of those assumptions, right? Then you have solved the dilemma that you have for yourself,
Correct. Correct. Correct.
right? So to help people understand that, in I think almost at the same time that this book came in,
Hmm.
Goldratt also came up with what we call a change matrix, right? And he wrote it in a different book in 2008, 2009. I think there was a movie also that he did on that, I think in 2010.
Mm-hmm.
It's called a change matrix, right? And what he does is, right, if you can imagine a 2 by 2 matrix, okay?
Right.
Uh, on in the rows you have a to change or to not to change,
Mm.
okay? And then on two sides you say what are the positives and what are the negatives.
Mm.
And he gives a very interesting kind of anecdote. Being Goldratt, right? He's always with
Yeah.
a very interesting way of explaining. So he says that imagine yourself, you are a person who is standing next to a lake,
Mm.
and you are supposed to get onto a mountain. Okay,
Okay.
so getting onto the mountain is the change.
Mm.
Okay, being next to the water body is no change.
Right.
Okay?
Correct.
And it says now identify what are the different pluses and minuses around it. Okay. And let us say, for example, if you want to go up the mountain, right? So one of the reasons why you want to go up the mountain is because you are assuming that at the end of it, there is a pot of gold.
Mm.
So your assumptions, all the positives of change, he calls
Mm.
them pot of gold.
Right.
All the negatives, right, could be that, I mean, one of the negatives could be you are afraid to do that change because you may fall down and you might get crutches. You may
Correct.
break your leg. So he
Possible.
calls them crutches. Okay, so he says list down your crutches. But then the other part would be, why do I want to stay here, right? So one of the possible reasons why you want to stay here as a person, right, near the water body, is because you have found that there is a mermaid in the and you've fallen in love with that mermaid, so you want to stay with the mermaid. So that's your reason to not change.
Right.
Okay.
There's a comfort with the lake.
And the negative could be that there are alligators in
Mm.
the water. So he has defined these four, quadrants into these four things. So you have a pot of gold, which is the positive of change, right? You have a crutches, which is the negative of change. Okay. You have mermaid, which is the positive of no change.
No change.
You have an alligator, which is the negative of no change. So this
Beautiful.
is where I actually got introduced to change metrics and the emotions that people have behind those that change,
Beautiful. Beautiful.
right? And I found that there is no better book, right, that talks about the emotions that people go through when it
I
comes.
agree. I agree. Especially in the assumptions column, it's just about emotions that we have, right? And look at the assumption. I mean, something that we don't know is going to be there. We still want to keep assuming that, right?
Correct, correct. That is going to
Interesting.
happen. Right? So that's.
Interesting. Interesting.
The
Wow.
other thing
That's
that I think as a completely new concept that the book gave was that traditional view of learning is that till about 30 years you learn and then you stop,
mm,
right? But I think Kagan and I were able to demonstrate that it's actually not that, but the way we learn changes over time, right? And I
right.
think that's one of the first concepts that
Correct.
became super popular. So you have three different types of minds. You have the socialized mind,
Mm,
self-authoring mind, and then you have the self-transforming mind. And
correct.
each so till about 30 years, you have a dominance of your socializing mind. So you learn from people and you learn from symbols, and you are a team player, and you are reliant and all of that. When you're starting to get self-authoring, right? Somewhere I think you and I, we are probably in that stage still.
Yeah.
To a certain extent, we are agenda driven, right? We try to have your own compass, we have to have your own framework, and we try to fit everything into our framework. Hopefully we have started to get into the self-transforming
Moving
where
into
we are
that.
also open to listening to what others are trying to say,
you know,
right?
that's probably because of the.
Maybe I'm wrong, right?
No, no, but I think you're right, because that could be because of the spiritual fats that this part of the diet that we spoke about.
Yes,
That could be one
yes.
reason why
That
you
starts coming
want to
in,
fall
isn't it?
down.
Right? So we have a slightly different mind frame. We are trying to, we are able to hold contradictions, right? And being both of them being from HBR, right? One of the things that I think one of the great insights that I got out of I don't think it was their article, it was somebody else's article, but it's still about holding contradictions at the same time, right?
Mm,
One of the greatest kind of characteristic, right, of all successful leaders across the world
Mm.
is that they can think strategic and operational at the same time,
Correct.
right? Which is something that we don't, I think, spend enough time about thinking.
Yeah. But not many can do that.
How can somebody, right, a Steve Jobs, for example, think 10-15 years down the line and at the same time so obsessed with the design of the product that is right in front of him,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely.
And that's where what makes it different. And this is true for all. I mean, it's not just Steve, but it is about most of the leaders that have been successful. I think the ability to keep contradictions, right, in mind at the same time, which is where I think that evaporating cloud helps,
Mm.
that I talked to you about, because it helps you to think about, I want to do this, at the same time I want to do this.
Lovely, lovely. So after this conversation, please message me that evaporating cloud concept. Where is it from? I would love to read a little more about it.
There is actually a website called www.evaporatingclouds, which is actually a website run by a co-author of mine and his friends, and you can actually draw your own clouds there.
Okay.
Think about, so and the beauty about evaporating clouds is that you have to be the decision maker. You cannot draw it for somebody else. You can help people draw it,
Mm, mm, mm,
you have
mm.
to do it for yourself, right? One of the classic examples of an evaporating cloud, right, is your, let's say, economic order quantity, right?
Correct.
Or let's say price. Okay, let's take that example, right? If you come up with a new product or a service for your business, right, you want to increase the price, at the same time you want to keep the price low,
Mm.
right? You cannot do both the things at the same time.
Right.
But so you're saying, I want to have a high price, at the same time I want to have a low price.
Mm.
This is a contradiction. Now, what the cloud says is that, okay, now this is your want. Think about the need behind it.
Mm.
So you want to keep a high price so that you can make margin.
Mm.
Okay. On the other hand, you want to keep the price low because
You get more customers.
you get more customers, you have more economy, I mean, more scale, right? Now comes the most interesting part. The point is that both of these are driving towards the same goal,
Mm.
right? Now, what is the goal? To make more money for your company.
Correct.
uh, and this is the point. I think this is what Gagan and Lai also talk about, is that you start with the big goal.
Yeah.
What is it that you want to do, right? And then work backwards towards the assumption. So I can see an absolute mapping of what Gagan and Lai talk about. Of course, they talk about from an emotional spike point of view, but the approach is very much applicable, right, in multiple ways that people look at, right? So in this case, right, you cannot do both. But so you want to you want to make more money for the company.
Mm.
For that, you want to make sure that you get enough margin, but
Mm.
at the same time, you want to also get more market space.
Correct.
And you can't, to do that, you are keeping the price high or you're keeping the price low, but you can't do both at the same time.
Absolutely.
Which means there are some assumptions behind it.
Mm.
Right? You have a certain assumption. Your assumption is that only by keeping the higher price can I increase my margin. You've not considered the fact that I can reduce the cost, for example.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? So this helps you to now think through, and what can I do to change that approach, right?
Mm.
So that I can still achieve, right? And the point that Goldratt talks about is that come up with sufficient injections, right? And the reason why he calls him evaporating cloud is because he says that if you come up with sufficient, at a point of time, after you give sufficient injections, the cloud will burst and it will evaporate.
Right.
The contradiction will no longer remain.
Mm. Mm.
So it's
Absolutely. I mean, we can do that one day if we're able to break that immunity to change within us, isn't it?
absolutely there, right? A lot of times we know what to do, but we don't do it.
Yeah.
Right? Because we have those certain assumptions. And that's what Gagan and Lai talk about, right? First, write down your goal, write down your actions that you are taking towards it or against it, right? Which is kind of the same structure that I just talked to you
Pretty
about.
much. Pretty much.
About, why am I doing it and why am I not doing it? And then write the assumptions behind it. And then the fourth column that they have is for the readers, you can obviously, give a search on immunity to change worksheet, and you will get sufficient worksheets that are, I'm sure, Rajiv, you must be consulting your clients with some of those worksheets also, right? So you start with the goal, then you identify, your actions and what you do, then you identify the assumptions behind them, and then you identify what can I do to negate some of those assumptions, right? I mean, it's easier said than done because, if people could change that easily, right? I mean, you and I will not be in the business, right? So, but But I think what the book gives you is that framework, right, to be able to do that.
Absolutely, I agree. I agree. I agree. I think it's the fact that these tools are so powerful, and what he talks about in his book, if people can pick it up and practice it in every occasion, I think they should be able to make those decisions, breaking that immunity to change within themselves. Lovely. That takes me to the next question, and I had a couple of one, but I love this freewheel conversation happening here. Shrikant. So I'm going to keep away the list of questions that I sent you, but I'm going to ask you one or two, which was very interesting, and I want to listen it from you. Right? You talk about a very interesting statement. Says when the immune system becomes part of the problem.
Mm.
I had not thought about it
Yeah.
till I read the book.
Yeah.
I just thought, how can an immune system be a part of a problem? Should it not be a part of the solution? But I said, okay, let me understand this. So let me hear it from you. What is the author trying to tell the leaders?
Um, to a certain extent, what happens is that as we keep and this there are various operations management theories, right, around, and one of them is a theory on what is called autopoiesis. Okay, it's one of the systems theories, and it talks about how any system is a living system,
Mm,
right? And the point that it talks about is that any living system, and you look at human body, for example, right? So we have a certain immunity that we keep on building for ourselves, right? And to a certain extent, what happens is that because we have so many assumptions, things that we do, right, they become then barriers
mm.
because we genuinely believe that it is not the right thing to do.
Okay.
Happens, right? As a system, right? I mean, this is true for all of us, right? A lot of times, what happens is that our immunity system, right, sometimes is a problem to administer a new drug because the body will react to the new drug. So instead of taking care of, like, this is one of the problems, by the way, for people who are trying to develop things on COVID-19. You want to make sure, right, that the vaccine that you create, right, doesn't create problems with the people's existing immunities,
Correct.
right? So you want to make sure that you have a vaccine which already takes care of only that virus that is
Mm,
currently there.
mm,
If
mm,
it
mm.
creates our body, any antibody that goes into our body, there is an automatic refusal to it,
Correct.
right? And the logic behind that is what? The logic behind that is that your body thinks that anything that is foreign is not good,
Yeah.
right? So the only way that you can coax the body to say, no, take this, it's
Mm,
useful, is through, conditioning the body some way or the other, right? So make it into a situation where it gets into the body, the blood streams without, the immunity system getting triggered.
yeah.
Now apply that same concept to any organization, for example.
Mm,
Right? They have structures put in place.
mm,
Example for that is, I'm not picking on any particular function, but a lot of times when you talk about procurement or legal or finance, right, a lot of times we see a lot of pushback.
yeah.
And the reason is not because they are trying to be difficult, right? I mean, sometimes they are, but in most cases, what they are trying to do is that they genuinely believe that by
Correct.
doing this, I'm
Correct.
protecting the organization,
Correct. Correct.
which unfortunately leads to a lot of conflicts within the organization, right? The CEO wants to do one thing, CEO wants to do one thing, but the CFO says, no, I mean, this is not as per what I believe. You
Mm,
better comply with whatever structures I have put in place. And
mm.
the reason why I'm doing that, he is genuinely concerned that you will destroy the equilibrium that I have put in place for this particular organization.
Right. Right.
That's when your immunity becomes part of the problem.
Part of the problem. Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you so much for articulating this with that example of the body and the organization. Right. So there's another one which was very interesting for me. And I want to ask this from a question for the budding leaders who are listening to you, Shrikant. Right.
Sure.
Uh, he talks about this beautiful three ingredients of unlocking your potential.
Uh, yeah, yeah.
Right. So tell us one instance from your journey to give an learning to the budding leaders of how can somebody use, not
You
all
mean,
three, at least one of that.
the gut and the head and heart and hand. uh, So to a certain extent, right? I mean, this is something that is not new, right? Kagan and Lahi haven't given you anything new, right? A lot of times when you talk about, I told you about decision making and my interest in decision making. So one of the things that definitely comes, right,
Mm,
especially in the first kind of types of, or probably the second, the behavioral decision making that started to
mm,
happen. One of
mm,
them was Jack Welch is straight from the gut, right?
right.
And he explains how a lot of times his decisions were, it's kind of they were driven by what he thought was right.
Mm, mm, mm,
Vital source of motivation for change for you to be able to do, right? And within, I mean, COPC is a small organization, but a lot of times we are taking decisions, right, which are based on that gut feel. We know that this will work, right? We know that it would be something that the industry would need, and we
mm,
have gone ahead and done that. I don't think I can divulge exactly, but there are certain regions, for example, where we
correct.
decided to go in, right? In spite of the fact that we knew that there is no market apparently currently,
Mm,
right?
mm,
There is nothing really that is happening there. But we said, no, let's give it a try because it seems to, it's my gut. I feel that it will work, right? And it did in some cases, and in some cases it didn't. But it's a vital source, right, for motivation,
mm,
for the change to happen. And it
right.
made us different. It has made us better. It has made us, what we are currently as an organization.
Mm. That would make the budding leaders ask you a question directly, Srikant. That then why are you talking about so many templates and techniques of decision making? Then we can go by gut because anyway, I go and pick up 10 shirts in a shop. They've got these buttons and all that lovely styles, but I have a feel that that particular fourth shirt on the seventh shelf will look good on me. I pick it up and walk out. So that's an absolutely intuitive gut-based decision, right? So are we
The
not Samar telling the budding leaders who can come and ask me, was itna gyan fit क्यों दे रहे हो? Intuitive decision ले लेते हैं life में.
So which is one of the biggest challenge that we find in decision making, right? And um, well, one of the things that the thesis that I worked on is to empirically prove that if you have a formal, structured approach on decision making, your decision making is better.
Better. Mm.
I have an empirical way of now proving it to you that if you have a structured approach of decision making, then
Mm.
your decision making is better. And better it essentially in multiple ways, right? One of them is that you are able to come up with more choices of options at least.
Okay.
And you are able to understand which options are more relevant, right? So to a certain extent, right? I mean, of course, you can go with the gut, and a lot of times, a lot of your shopping that you do, right? Like if you are you going to buy your iPhone, next iPhone, I mean that decision is not really based on a decision tree and a decision matrix and a lot of that. A lot of it is based on gut, right? But this is one of the things that Kagan and Lai talk about is that if you have a good uh, combination of the three ingredients, right? One is
Mm.
the gut, right? But then you also have to look at your head and heart, right? Which
Mm.
is the work must include both thinking and the feeling,
Yeah.
right? And then it should also talk about the mindset and the behavior, which is the hand part, right? Which
Correct.
is something Ramcharan also talks about execution, right? A lot of people have great ideas, but
Yeah.
then it really comes down to actually executing them, right?
Correct.
The frameworks basically help you to do that. And this is, I mean, just maybe not related, but this is not just a question that is about the book. The question
Mm.
is about everything, right? I mean, people come to me, and this is my daily, discussion with my clients, right? And people at large. COPC has a framework for managing your customer experience,
Mm.
right? Now,
Mm.
you choose not to use the framework. You can still run a contact center business, and you can run a customer experience business,
Absolutely.
right? But then why are there 450, 500 companies across the world who are picking up COPC and doing that as a framework? The reason for that is that it helps, it is tried, tested,
Mm.
one, right? Secondly, you also feel a sense of belonging, right? You know that this is something that
Correct.
others have done, it would work better. So you are able to speak. Thirdly, it is a great change agent in itself.
Mm. Mm.
So you say that look, this is a framework. So you and I, we can communicate. All of us have a different agenda, right?
Yeah.
We are working together in one organization.
Mm. Mm.
Rally the people, right, through the same thought process,
Mm.
right? for which I think, Rajiv, you must be also working on it. The reason I think you run your consulting based on books,
Yeah,
so that everybody speaks the same language. So
yeah,
when you talk about a certain thing, right, people, oh, okay, this is what he means, right?
yeah.
When you talks about, now today, after this particular session, right, when you talk about immunity to change, right, people will know, okay, this is the book, which is where there is
Yeah,
something
yeah,
about,
yeah.
emotional part to the decision making. So everybody, when I say that, right, they understand, right?
Correct. So it's absolutely it's about that standardization you're trying to bring in, right? Within between the hand and the heart and the mind. Can I get this? Everybody thinks the same way, kind of tries to do the same thing. So
There is also
somewhere,
one more part, and
despite the differences in individuals, are we able to create one kind of a common result that we want to achieve?
there is also one more part to it, which is what I mean. I will go back to
Yeah.
since we just talked about Jack Welch. I got reminded of his one of the things that he talked about in his Straight from the Gut. No, so when he took over the plant the first time, what he did is that he thought that I need to do to change. I need to show something physical.
Mm.
So he took an axe and he went, and so there was a huge inventory and people were not ready to get rid of the inventory. He took the axe, he went in and personally he chopped the inventory off. Like he basically chopped the places where all that chemicals were kept, and that created a huge impact on people because there
Mm.
is something visual. People can see that
Correct.
this is happening. So
Correct.
the point that I was making, apart from whatever you rightly said, right, is that using a certain set of templates, frameworks, right,
Mm.
gives you that it becomes a change agent in itself.
Absolutely.
So I say, rather than saying, "Oh, we want to change," blah blah blah, you say, "Here is an immunity to change worksheet. Let's fill it."
Correct.
Right? So then it becomes more, real.
Yeah, yeah. And as you rightly said, it's time tested, right? So the moment you know it's time tested, you have this Cialdini's influencing tip of social proof, right? I want to be part of that. Let me try. If it's worked for 100 companies, it should work for me as well.
Absolutely. That
And
you
that
right.
creates a big moral pressure into me to try it out, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Right. Right.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Right. And the last part is, I think you were alluding to it, which is about, all these frameworks, right? They
Mm.
help you also communicate internally.
Mm.
Right. So a lot of times, I mean, this evaporating clouds, for example, right? I use it a lot of times just to communicate between me and my client,
Mm.
because a lot of times they come with their own hang-ups and assumptions and ideas and all of that. So we say, okay, fine, right, this is not one you versus me or whatever that is, right? Let's put this down on paper, so it helps me to think through.
Right.
So to a certain extent, a lot of these things that I think you guys are talking about during your this session is about also making it as a communication tool.
Right.
So I guess that would be another use for having these kind of worksheets and templates and so on.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Beautiful. I love the way you answer the questions, Shrikant. It's just one, two, three, four in a process. I'm just loving it. Those are absolutely freewheel chat, but there's a lot of
You
processes
just think
within
that
the
it's probably
freewheel.
time for me to retire now. So I will spend too much time on.
No, no, definitely not. I mean, I'm loving it. I'm just loving it. It's so interesting. The topic is so heavy, right? You can't do justice in 45 minutes. We can just probably touch the tip of the iceberg. But I think it's a powerful conversation. So I'm going to take you to the next question before I ask you the last one. So last but one that I have is, um, how do leaders work on this very powerful concept that he talks about of surfacing their collective immunity to change? So all this while we spoke about individual.
So one of the biggest problems that I find, right, is even when I use the evaporating clouds, right? So if you see, the clouds has three stages to it, right? It talks about coming up with the entities, which
Mm,
are the wants and the needs and the goal.
mm,
Then it is about surfacing the assumptions, and then it is about finding out the injections to the assumptions, right? Basically,
mm,
think get rid of those assumptions. The toughest, and by the way, there is a book by Fedorko in 2013. She's written about evaporating clouds also. So for those of your readers and listeners who are interested, you could look her up. So in that book also, she talks about the most difficult part of these three steps is surfacing the assumption,
mm,
right? And a lot of times that surfacing the assumption doesn't happen in one shot. You have to give it, you have to rest on it, you have to kind of sleep over it, you have to ask questions, you have to brainstorm, you have to probably go back and look at the data that you have.
mm,
One of the problems that I see, right, is that there is this I don't know whether it was Descartes or who to blame, but we go by the Western way of looking at things because
Mm,
our studies, right, and it's true for all of us, right? You and
mm,
I,
mm.
we've gone through a slightly Westernized way of learning, right?
Yeah.
And Westernized way of learning, there is a dichotomy,
Mm,
right? So it talks about is either this or that, right? So it
mm.
says that you either have a qualitative tool or a quantitative tool.
Correct.
And these tools that we talk about are qualitative, and if I'm applying a qualitative tool, then somehow our mind is blocked and we never use quantitative tools along with them.
Correct. Correct.
So to answer your question, I would probably use a combination of tools. Currently, let us say I am using, let's say I'm using the immunity to change
Mm,
metrics, right?
mm.
And I get stuck about assumptions. I don't get the assumptions. I don't think we have the approach, right, where we say, अच्छा ठीक है, data देखते हैं.
Mm.
We keep thinking about अच्छा क्या हो सकता है क्या हो सकता है क्या हो सकता है, but the point is that it is not just a qualitative tool. If you
Right.
combine your qualitative tool with some of the quantitative, right, I mean you have now with all these business intelligence and AI and all that people keep talking about, there
Mm.
is just a barrage of data that is available,
Actually.
isn't it? So this is the place where you can combine the two. And in research, people keep talking about multi-methodology and all of that. But in reality, if you look at it as an individual manager, we always at back of our mind,
Mm.
right? Would you agree? We have a classification. We think that ये ना qualitative tool है, ये quantitative tool है. So Pareto chart is a quantitative tool. Fishbone diagram is a qualitative tool, and I don't combine the two. I mean, what is the point? You can't. Obviously, the point is you are trying to solve a problem,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So any two, right? If you think that at a point of time, right, if you are not able to come up with assumptions, then to shorten my answer,
Mm.
look at the data. That would be.
Absolutely. I agree. Even if you kind of take it a little from here into a negotiation table also, you have both the access, right? I can't really win the game. We move on qualitative or I need to use both to win the heart and the mind of the other person and negotiate and get my argument, right?
Right. That's one of the things that Kagan and Lai talk about, right? That's the second ingredient that they talk
Yeah,
about.
yeah, yeah, yeah. You're true. You're true. So lovely, lovely. All right. So I'm going to ask you the last question, right? And based on all that you said, Srikant, and immunity change and decision making, what are two laser sharp advices that you will give to the budding leaders?
Um, I mean, one of the things that I would definitely that came to me personally from the book, right, and which I've already mentioned to you, is about the change is people. It's not that people don't change because they are afraid of change,
Yeah.
right? So first, as a huge kind of an epiphany, if you ask me, that was an epiphany.
Mm.
So I'm hoping that as part of this particular discussion, right, the listeners that of ours have been able to understand that, and hopefully that has given them an aha moment around it, right? So
Yeah.
all your managers, all your team, right, yourself, whenever there is a change and you think, because you've been conditioned to think that you are not changing because you are afraid of the change. It's
Mm.
not the fear; it is the assumptions.
Yeah.
The moment you reorient your point of view, right, you will start seeing that the change starts happening on its own, because you are no longer are saying that this change is because I mean, I'm not doing this change because I'm afraid of it.
Correct. Correct.
I'm trying to identify the assumptions behind it, right? That would be the first
The
part.
first one.
And I guess the second thing would be, this is, this might be a slightly controversial statement out there, but I would like to put it out anyway, right? A lot of times people are worried that, we have so much data and a lot of decision making is happening through like machine learning and artificial intelligence and all of that. And the question is that, so are we getting obsolete as managers, right? And I want to kind of just put my point around it. And the
Mm.
point is that there are certain types of decisions which the AI and then all these technologies might be able to do.
Mm.
And there are certain types of decisions which you have to take. and there is no substitute for it, at least as of now, and maybe for another 20 years, if I may.
Correct. Correct.
Right? So to a certain extent, right, you have to seize that opportunity. And
Mm,
as think about, how much time of your daily routine are
mm,
you spending on taking decisions
mm.
which cannot be taken by technology?
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Right? If you are spending maybe 80% of your time in taking decisions that tomorrow, and by the way, I mean, you know, and I know we have had job roles which have become obsolete
Absolutely.
overnight.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the reason for that is people are sitting and taking decisions which technology can take.
Yeah. Yeah.
Think about every, your day, look at your general day, right? And look at the decisions that you take and
Mm.
tell me how many, let's say you take in a day, every manager takes about 5 to 10 decisions
Correct.
in at any level, right?
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
Out of those 10 decisions, are
Mm.
you taking at least 6 decisions which could not have been taken by technology?
If you think it's right, actually you're right.
If you are doing that, then you're doing something right. If not, then you might have to augment your job role in such a way that you are getting and doing something right, which is
You're
more
right.
relevant, because you are doing non-value add activity.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
And this is where, right now, that once you do that, that would be my last thing. Once you have that, then you will appreciate the book Immunity to Change even more, because those are the decisions where change becomes important.
Absolutely.
Right?
Look
When
at
you talk about, right, so the decisions that are that require a human being's thinking will require those three ingredients, will require you to sit and think through, right, will require you to take a decision, right? And for that, then you have to think about what are the emotions that people will go through,
Mm.
right? Like, I mean, one of the classic examples of decision today that almost everybody has, right, as managers, I'm sure you also are going through that, is that, now that we are having people working from home,
Mm.
am I going to have this as an ongoing process, or should I consider it to be something that will happen and then maybe once the movement restrictions stop, or maybe let's say tomorrow vaccine comes in and by 2021 we have a vaccine, right? In spite of that, Rajiv,
Mm.
right? Would you continue on work at home, or would you try to bring your staff back in the office? Isn't that a decision? And this is a
Absolutely.
decision that a technology may not be able to take right now, because there are several aspects to it.
Absolutely. I mean, you're right. You're taking this example itself, Microsoft having announced that work from home permanently.
Yeah,
And then on the other side, Satya Nadella says that, oh, what, I'm bored of working from home.
exactly, right.
And it's a contradictory statement between the
It's a
CEO's
contradiction.
personal opinion and the organization's decisions, right? And end of the day, as Charles Darwin says, we are Homo sapiens, we are social animals primarily. I want to go meet a Srikant. I want to have a chat with him walking on the lobbies of my office. I want to have a cup of coffee with Srikant. I don't talking to Srikanth in a box like this on a Zoom dabba for lifetime.
That's true.
I will die to death. That's
Right.
not a possibility. But
Correct.
the fact of the matter is, if COPC as an organization today gives a data saying, you know what, work from home has increased productivity, everybody would say, घर से काम करो, घर से काम करो. अभी
Exactly.
आप लोग अगर 10 महीने बाद एक लेके आते हो कि data now shows there has been tremendous burnout because of which attrition has gone up by 10%. सारे CEO बोलेंगे आजा 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 कंपनी आजा वापस आ जाओ. So I will blame it on people.
I will cite one of my favorite authors, Juran, right? He says that it is data, but it is nothing if it is just data.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
Right? A lot of times it is about whether the dog is wagging the tail or the tail is wagging the dog, right? I mean, a lot of times we make our decisions based on that.
Correct.
I mean, we are getting into getting into that part, but that would be, so those are the decisions, right? If we are doing that, and as managers, if you are part of those decisions for your organization, or if you're doing it, there are two things. I mean, forget about the job security. I think you will enjoy your job more.
I agree. I completely
You
agree.
know that you are contributing something real,
True, true, true.
right? And that would probably be my, I mean, I'm not that old to give advice to everybody.
No,
I'm
no,
still,
I mean, great
I'm still
input.
the second plateau, right? We talked about that. We're not in
It's
the
still
third.
okay. No, but one leg is there, one leg is here.
One leg is
you're
there,
still on the
one
right.
leg
You're
is
still on
there.
the right. Super. Thank you so much, Shrikant, for coming on this event and sharing your insight. It was a pleasure chatting with you. I hope you also enjoyed the conversation.
I think it was great. Thank you for. I mean, every time I speak with people, that's one of the reasons why I'm a teacher. I enjoy doing that because every time I speak with people, I get to kind of think through what I'm going. I'm talking about. It just helps me sort out my thought process. So thank you for this invitation. It was great.
Pleasure. Pleasure is all mine. And it was lovely having a chat with you. Look
Sure.
forward to see you sometime in person when things open up and I start flying out, Shrikant.
Yeah, yeah. Let's grab a beer somewhere in.
We'll do that. We'll do that. Absolutely. Till then, you have a lovely time. Stay safe and see you soon.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you once again.